morning and welcome back to another Facebook Live with the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut. My name is Lauren Pryor and today we're going to be talking about some evergreen species that we can find here in Connecticut, whether it be in your backyard, a park, some public landscaping, or in a public forest. So evergreen trees, there's tons and tons of species in general. We're going to take a look at 3 species today and talk about how we can kind of look at these leaves. The needles are still leaves, just in a different shape. How we can identify them in the winter. IDing trees in general in the winter is a little tricky because most trees do lose their leaves. Our deciduous trees, our broadleaf trees, so like our oaks and our maples and our birches, they lose their leaves, so you have to look at their bark, which is a whole other topic. So we're going to start with something a little easier, a smaller bite to chew. Trees that do keep their leaves during the winter time are conifers, and we're going to look at a shrub that is not a conifer, does not have needles, but is still an evergreen. So let's first talk about why trees lose their leaves in the winter time. So if we think of oaks or maples, for example, these are huge trees, big leaves. They drop them come fall, hence in autumn, hence the kind of word fall, because their leaves are falling down. In the winter time, resources become less readily available. Resources that a plant needs in general, we need sunlight, nutrients in the soil, and water. So if we're thinking of water here, water becomes less available as in the wintertime temperatures are lower, water freezes. So generally it's a bit drier and trees can't readily bring up water from their roots. So a lot of trees come autumn will start to grow additional cells at the point where the leaves attach to the branches, cutting off resources for those leaves. That's why they start to drop. The colors, they're not getting the resources, and then they drop, they die. So the trees have shed those leaves, and then the tree itself does not have to spend resources maintaining those leaves throughout the winter. Evergreens, on the other hand, like this hemlock, eastern hemlock, for example, which we're going to talk, one of the species we're going to talk about today, they can keep their leaves, their needles, their leaves, just in a different shape, because they have a waxy coating on them. So when you go into your backyard or the park and you see needle-like trees, you can give them a feel. They're kind of waxy. They've got this waxy coating which essentially traps the water inside, so the tree doesn't have to worry about losing that resource as it goes through the winter. So we have 3 species that we're going to talk about today. We've got 2 trees. We're going to talk about a spruce tree. We're going to talk about our eastern hemlock, and then we're going to talk about a shrub, which is Connecticut state flower, the mountain laurel. So I gathered, we've got our spruce here we can take a quick look at. So all these samplings, these are just a very small sampling of the plants that grow here on the Indian Rock Nature Preserve. Other tree species we have tons of different oak trees, we have a variety of the different birches, we have beech trees, we've got some sassafras growing, we've got witch hazel, not much for maples at Indian Rock though. But let's start with our spruce. So we'll get an up close look on our spruce needles. Spruce and hemlock, the 2 trees that we're going to talk about today. Remember, our mountain laurel is more of a shrub evergreen. But our 2 trees, our hemlock and our spruce, are very important for ecosystems as they provide tons and tons of food for animals as well as shelter. So our spruce is kind of droopy. This is but a very small sampling of this spruce tree. They can grow over 100 feet tall, very large trees, but very, very kind of droopy branches. The needles are just over an inch long, green all the way around, and they do end in a point. So a lot of the times when we take people out for walks, people will comment that they have trouble distinguishing trees from each other. All the trees kind of look the same, except for, if you can tell if they have a broadleaf or a needle. So how we can tell a spruce tree from, say, our hemlock, because both these trees have needles, they're both green, they both have these brown branches. So how we're going to start to tell the spruce from the hemlock is when we look at those needles. So the needles are about an inch long, they're spiky, and if we take one off here, the little needle, there we can see the little spike, it does end in a point. These needles can easily roll between your fingers. So a good thing to think in your head if you're thinking, oh, is this coming from a spruce tree, is it's a spiky. If we were to break this in half, it rolls, it's square. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, it's square, it rolls, that doesn't make sense. Round things roll. I mean, you can easily kind of twirl it between your fingers. You can feel the sides of it pretty easily, but you can roll it in between your fingers. So we've got a spiky square, because a little cross section of it is square. I know it's hard to see because it's very small, but if you do break it in half, you can see it has a square shape. The cross section is square. So a spiky square spruce. So that's a good way to kind of remember spiky square spruce. So we're located in Bristol, but in Litchfield there is a champion spruce that has a record of being very large. It's over 124 feet. Okay, so our hemlock, we have the eastern hemlock here. We still see that green color. It's keeping its green throughout the winter. It's got that nice waxy coating. But it's the same colors as that spruce. So how are we going to tell the difference? Again, we're going to look at the needles. So we can take a look. As we take a look, you might start to notice some differences. I'll take a small piece off here and a small piece off of our spruce. So on top I've got our hemlock, on the bottom I've got our spruce. So side by side with the even smaller sample, you can start to see those differences. With the hemlock, remember hemlock's on top, the eastern hemlock, it's much more flat. The hemlock branches are very loose and flowy, they have this lacy look to them. But the needles are relatively flat, where our spruce, the needles are coming out kind of on all sides, giving kind of an overall cylinder shape, where our hemlock is very flat. When we look at the needles themselves, the hemlock needles are smaller than our spruce. Remember, spruce on the bottom, eastern hemlock on the top. So I'll rotate the hemlock so we get kind of the side view. So this is if we were looking bird's eye down. Compared to the spruce, the needles are smaller. The needles on the eastern hemlock are only about 1/2 inch. The top of the hemlock also tend to be darker, where the bottom, let's see if the camera picks it up, tends to be kind of a lighter, more silver color. When we flip over our hemlock, so we've got the top, darker on top, lighter, more silver green on the bottom. When we look at the bottom, you also want to look for two very thin white lines. The camera's not going to pick it up much because they're just that thin and that small. But when you look at the bottom of an eastern hemlock, you want to look for two very thin lines. So you can always remember, too, a good way to remember our eastern hemlock compared to our spruce. Remember, we have a spiky square spruce. Our eastern hemlock is flat and friendly, so instead of spiky, flat and friendly. And then the needles, when they're attached to the tree, the branch, they've got a little tiny stem. So the needle is attached like a leaf stem. So you can remember, hems have stems, hemlocks, hems have stems. Where in other types of needle-like trees, sometimes the needles are in more of like a suction cup fashion. They don't really have a stem, they're directly into the branch. So flat, friendly, hems have stems, spiky square spruce. Okay, so when you're out on your next winter walk and all the deciduous trees don't have leaves, so you're going to have to look at their bark, which is a bit more challenging. You have a bit more detail for the eye. So you want to start with something a little easier, something that does have leaves. You look at your evergreens, spruce and hemlock, two ways to tell them apart. But let's check out our third specimen, the mountain laurel. Now, a mountain laurel is Connecticut state flower. This cutting, we do see a little bit of leaf damage. But this is an example of a plant that does have leaves. Those more traditional leaves, we would say. Remember, these needles are leaves, they're just in a different shape. But this mountain laurel, again, when we feel it, it's very tough, rough, it has a waxy coating. So this tree is able to conserve its water during the winter, a very important resource for plants. That waxy coating lets the leaves conserve their water, so the tree doesn't have to really expend much in order to save them through the winter. Remember, our other deciduous trees, broadleaf trees like our oaks, maples, birches, they're dropping their leaves because those leaves don't have a waxy coating, so they're going to be losing water. The tree doesn't want to lose water during the winter time because it's not as readily available because it's frozen. They get rid of the leaves, but if you have a waxy coating, you can save your leaves. So the mountain laurel is a shrub. It can go from Maine down to Florida. Connecticut state flower. We don't have any flowers on it now. Flowers will come in the springtime, but they're this nice pink. They can be white, very light pink, all the way down to a dark pink. We have done a Facebook Live on the mountain laurel itself in the springtime, so if you go through our past Facebook Live videos, you'll find a whole video just on the mountain laurel. But they can be up to about 9 meters tall. It's about 18 feet. They have these nice oval-shaped leaves, kind of ending in a point. The leaves at their largest It can get up to about 4 inches long, and then about, at their largest, about 2 inches wide. 1.5 inches, 2 inches wide. This is just a little sampling of the mountain laurel, but a lot of times the wood from it, the wood isn't used really to make furniture because it's not that strong and it's not that big. The branches are not very thick. Instead, they're used to make kind of smaller household items. So you might use it to make a bowl, some utensils, or you can use it for kind of decorative items like wreaths. We have a question from Rachel. Do the leaves on the mountain laurel stay green during the winter? Yes, they stay green during the winter time. They don't have that great big pop of green that they usually do. We do have a little bit of leaf damage here, but they do stay relatively green because of that waxy coating that lets them conserve the water, so they can stay green all year round. Mountain laurel, they like to be in really rocky areas. But we have quite a bit of mountain laurel here on the Indian Rock Nature Preserve, but if you also go over to the Barnes Nature Center here in Bristol, we have quite a big patch of mountain laurel right at our trailhead. The Barnes Nature Center building right now is closed, but as always, the trails are open sunrise to sunset 7 days a week. So you can go out there by yourself, with your friend, or with a family, socially distanced of course. See if you can spot some hemlock or spruce or mountain laurel and kind of start to stretch your winter tree ID skills based off of whether the tree even has leaves or not and what those leaves look like. So in review, we have a spruce that we checked out today. Our spruce, you're going to tell it's a spruce. They grow very large. They've got droopy branches. When you get up close, you're going to look at those needles. Remember, spiky, square spruce. So our needles are an inch, just over an inch long, end in a point. You can twirl the needles easily between your fingers. Spiky, square spruce. Our hemlock, on the other hand, is flat and friendly, not spiky. If we think of spikes as being bad, flat, friendly. Since they're flat, they can't easily roll between your fingers. They kind of get stuck. They don't have that rolling edge. When you look closely at the needle, you'll see that they're attached to the branch with a stem. So we have an eastern hemlock. Hems have stems. And then, of course, our mountain laurel, a more leafy shrub that can keep its leaves. You're looking for oval leaves, 4 inches long maximum, 2 inches wide maximum. That will soon start to pop out flowers come in the spring. So those are just 3 species that you can find here in Connecticut that will help you start to build your winter tree ID skills. So you can head over to the Barnes Nature Center and see if you can find any. But we're going to be back. Today is Thursday, so we're going to be back next Tuesday, next week on Tuesday, here on the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut Facebook page for another Facebook Live. If you have an environmental topic that you are interested in and you would like us to cover it, make sure to comment below in this video and we'll make sure to cover it for you. You can give our Facebook page a follow to make sure you stay up to date on all of our upcoming programs. But thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you again on Tuesday.